Okay, yes, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Rugby Muscle Podcast. I'm your host, as always, TJ, and today I am joined by the one and only Nic Gill, aka Gilly, the strength and conditioning coach for the All Blacks. And obviously, if you hear that, you probably think this is going to be an interesting listen. You probably think this is definitely worth your time, and I would agree. But it's also more than that because Nic is a very interesting dude with background in endurance sports as well as academia. Just really excited to bring him on the show, ask a few questions to him, not just about the All Blacks, but about his whole background, his influences, how he has shaped what is, aside from the last two World Cups, the most dominant team in the history of the sport. And get into a whole bunch of other things because he's also set up Rugby Ready, which is an online platform for rugby players as well, which has his backing and has his expertise building into. So I'm excited to get into this one. I'm not going to give you his whole background because I do want to dig into that with him himself. So without further ado, let's get into this podcast with Nic Gill. Okay, Nic, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. For those who aren't quite aware of your background, although they are aware now because I've already given you an intro beforehand, if you were to give yourself a quick brief intro to yourself and what you do, and we can go from there.
Okay, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me. Nic Gill, I've been working in rugby for, 24 years as an S&C coach. Now the head of performance of the All Blacks. Been with the All Blacks for, I think it's my 18th year. And yeah, that's pretty much my full-time gig at the moment. Got a few little side hustles, but namely Rugby Ready, which is an online strength and conditioning sort of platform for players of all shapes and sizes. But yeah, that's what I do. I'm a rugby S&C, rugby performance coach. Live and breathe it, love it.
Beautiful. And how did you, 17 years, did you say? With the All
This is my
Blacks?
18th year, yeah.
Nice. So I'm sure the game has changed a ton in that time, and we'll probably get into that in a bit. But I'd like to know how you landed that job in the first place and how you found yourself into strength and conditioning coaching.
Yeah, so strength and conditioning, I suppose, started. I was at school, didn't know what I was going to do. Was pretty good at some sports and average at others. But I started learning about the human body and things, and just decided that was my passion. So went to university. Actually had no desire to work in rugby at that stage. Was more of a triathlete, cycling type person. But volunteered to help the local rugby team, and yeah, the year after I was getting paid to do it, and then just sort of grew. Rugby had only been professional for 4 years when I started, so it's sort of I've been along for the ride, I suppose. And then the All Black job, first year in Super Rugby, we made the semis. The All Blacks advertised for an assistant S&C coach, and I applied, got the job. Lasted about 10 test matches and then left. Just my young family, we were having another baby, so went back to Super Rugby full time for 3 years, and then went back to the All Blacks in '08 and been there since.
Nice. Was it like the strength and conditioning and like the sports science side of things? Was that one of those situations where, like, in New Zealand, I know it's like quite a ruthless culture of sport, and so there's like a bucket load of talent, which we'll get into as well. So it's kind of like one of those things where you need to turn over every stone that you can to try and find that little bit of an edge. And was it a case of you trying to look for those little edges where you could, and then discovering, oh, okay, this made me a little bit better here, this made me a little bit better there, and then it kept you like leading into a whole field of strength and conditioning?
Yeah, a little bit. I think, yeah, I was probably like that before I got to the All Blacks, like looking for every little edge. And then when I got into the All Blacks, it was a bit different. That we were a touring team. We didn't have a base. Players came and went, and it was actually more a matter of simplifying things and then trying to look for the latest and greatest silver bullet. So I've sort of continued on that path and my time, and that we keep things pretty simple. Just try and do it very, very well, and we try not to overcomplicate things because the game's complicated enough. touring and living out of a suitcase is hard enough. Not to say we don't keep looking at what we're doing, how we're doing it, can we do it different, better, fresher. We're always looking to be better, but the sports science side of things is part of our program. It doesn't dominate the program.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's sort of there's the complexities that are within like the biology and the systems that are at play that have the effect from the training, but it doesn't necessarily manifest to the training in itself being overly complicated. That's one thing I've always found from watching any of the gym stuff that we've got that you guys put out with the All Blacks. It's always so meat and potatoes, so simple, but that doesn't mean like to look at, but that doesn't mean that it's not effective, because especially in social media. I mean, listeners to this podcast now, I always rant on social media and like how it can mislead people, but that's one of the things that people always expect is like flashy things. And then they see the All Blacks just doing squats, cleans, bench presses, the basic lifts, and it's like, no, that's what works.
Yeah, well, I think you just answered the question yourself. I think strength training is actually not that complicated, is it?
No.
You want to get strong or stay strong. You lift heavy and you lift well, and you go through a full range of the core movements. And a lot of people try to complicate things and change things up and vary things a lot. But a runner doesn't try to complicate their running program by cycling. They just run, and we're the same. We're rugby players. We're out on the park practicing our basic skill set, game understanding. In the gym, we're trying to be strong, stay strong, and I suppose get better. As an athlete, you touched on it. Like the human body is a complex organism, and when there's plenty going on around the body, around travel, around playing, around family stresses, around sleep, to then add another complication in the gym. Sometimes you just got to ask yourself, why and what's the point? But simple done well is probably my mantra for sure.
Beautiful. And is that also one of the things that sort of stems from the fact that you're the head of performance for the All Blacks, which is then feeds into the Super Rugby franchises, which then they feed themselves into their own club rugby, etc. So it's hard to then like preach what could be a really complicated message out to all these different people, and then have them feed whatever complex data they need to feed back into you, or is it just a case of this really works well, so I'm just going to keep sticking with it?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. The clubs themselves probably dabble around the fringes a bit more than we do. They've got a base. They're together for sort of 6 or 7 months. They don't really do international travel. I mean, nowadays Super Rugby, for example, their big trips to Canberra in Australia, it's just across the ditch, so it's hardly travel. But with the international teams, we're traveling 24 hours, 12-hour time shifts. We don't have the luxuries of living out of our own gym. We have suitcases with our gym gear in it. We train in hotel gyms. It's very much a different sort of program. Whereas the clubs tend to have some of them are very innovative around their sports science side of things. But there's clubs that are very innovative and sports science driven that are doing well, and some that aren't doing well. And then there's some clubs that are meat and potatoes and doing well, and some other meat and potato clubs aren't. So it's sort of it depends on lots of other things rather than the complexity of what's happening in the gym or on the field.
Absolutely. And again, once they're with you, they're already in an All Black squad, which means they are already the cream of the crop, or close to it at least physically. So there's no turning them into a diamond. At that point they already are there, so it's just about like the small refinements and almost stopping them from messing up, I can imagine.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in some ways my job's a bit easier because I've got, as you say, the cream of the crop, the people that have survived the club season, good athletes. I think there's don't worry, there's still plenty of polishing that needs to go on because often a player can still make the All Blacks and need a fair bit of work, because they're very talented, but they could be young and haven't got there on talent without necessarily working hard or doing anything well. So there's still a high level of polishing and coaching that's required in education, but probably less than what the guys in the clubs had experienced.
Okay, I want to piggyback off that then and say and ask you. You don't necessarily have to name names because I don't want you to put your foot in it. But are there many examples that you can think of athletes or players that have made the All Blacks, even made like the squad at least, maybe even had a few tests that haven't looked or if people saw them in the gym, they'd be surprised at how inadequate their actual strength and conditioning and overall preparedness is?
Yeah, well, he won't mind me saying it because he's repeated this phrase many a time. But Sam Whitelock came to the All Blacks, I think it was 2010. So he's only just retired. So 160 tests or something ridiculous. But he turned up and he was 107 kilograms as a lock for the All Blacks. And I met him for the first time, and I saw him in the gym, and I said to him, mate, you're skinny, you're light, you're actually carrying some body fat, you're weak, you're slow, and you're unfit. How come you've turned up with the All Blacks at 32? And he laughed at me and he said he was 21. But he looked like an old man and he had no condition to him at all. He finished playing his last game for the All Blacks, so 14 years later, he put on about, I'd say, 16 kilos of muscle, and was still getting gains in his strength and power, to his very last game in the final of the World Cup last year. So he's a great example of someone that's come in young, was just a tough athletic player and was there on talent, but had a big sort of hill to climb physically. He was young, had lots to learn, but he worked super hard, and it didn't take him long. Only took him a year or two, and he was in pretty good shape. But he's a classic All Black that turned up, couldn't really squat to save himself, shit range, weak, and it took him a few years to get his squat to a half decent place. And he got to the point where he was sort of who you'd point to in the gym to say to young players, you need to squat like him. So, there's many stories like that, but he's probably my favourite.
Yeah, I like that because you also, to say that you can get a few test caps based just on talent is kind of crazy to say because that's still a crazy level of talent. But that is possible. But to do the legacy that he's done, there's literally no way you do that without hard work and years of hard work.
100%. Like, it's easy to get a couple of caps. Yeah. And when I say easy, obviously it's not that easy. But once you're selected, it's pretty easy to get a couple, and then it's really an achievement to get a lot. And 100 test matches for any international player is huge. 160 or whatever it ended up being, legendary.
Yeah, and to do that, and not just to sort of survive the test realm, but to be one of the stalwarts and standout players throughout different years throughout that career, and then as you say to keep improving on the numbers year on year as he's got into his 30s and then late 30s, where people think, oh, you've got nothing to do but just to hold on to whatever you've got. He's actually still pushing it into that last year.
Yeah, I think I don't want to get my numbers wrong, but I'll have a crack. I'm pretty sure the World Cup final in 2023, that week, I think he equalled his PB for snatch. So it's sort of you bang on, like you could easily just try and hang on, but if you're a legend, you tend to just keep trying to be better. You want to go out on top, and whenever that is. So, yeah, definitely. There's no slouching around for some of those legends that play 100 plus.
Absolutely. So, on that line, who was the most impressive athlete that you can remember working with, and you can define impressive however you wish to?
I think physically. I think I'm working with one right now. I've worked with a few, but the one that probably has the most amazing attributes across the board is Rieko Ioane. So Rex is now playing midfield, but he's 105, 106 kilograms, got no body fat on him. He's tall. He's the fastest guy in New Zealand, I think. Still, he runs 36, 37 kilometers an hour every week. He's very fit aerobically, so he can run all day. I think he's a 540 in the Bronco, 440 in the Bronco, something like that. And strong, he squats a couple of 100 kilos. So, he's got everything. And so from a physical attribute perspective, he probably covers all the bases. And then you got people like Richie McCaw, who could just run all day and never slow up. Bowden Barrett, the same. I've watched Bowden Barrett do a Bronco before when he was in his prime, and it was like watching a plane take off. It was just unreal. He just got faster and faster. Everyone else slows down. And Bowden's just like a plane, just gradually building up speed. And then, the last couple of laps of the Bronco were just sprinting and just not hardly even puffing, just beautiful to watch. So, lucky to work with a lot of blessed athletes.
For sure. Ioane's one that, you say he's changed position as well. He's moved infield and now, can even, you forget how rapid he was. He was, when he was doing sevens, he was one of the fastest on that circuit there. And now he's midfield because of, he's put on some size and his passing ability as well. So you can see what a threat a player that is fully developed can really be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll switch gears a little bit and with the strength and conditioning talk and go a little bit more into the sort of the weeds of things a little bit. So I want to know what you think has been the biggest change that you've seen either with your squad or with the way the game is played or the demands of the game since since you started working with the boys.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think something that sort of it doesn't annoy me, but a big change I've seen is the players have got a lot bigger, and the reason why that's happened, I think, is twofold. I think the game's got slower. You're allowed an extra prop on the bench, so by having an extra player on the bench, typically the props can be bigger and only have to play 40 or 50 minutes before the whole front row's subbed out. So that sort of increased the size of or one of the reasons for the sizes of the players that are running around international rugby. The set piece is so demanding physically, as in the scrums. Each scrum takes 2 or 3 minutes to pack down. So there's not a lot of rugby played in a game. 30 to 40 minutes of rugby, and it takes 100 minutes to play that. So that's, I think, meant that the athletes don't need to be as fit across the board. I'm not saying they're not as fit, but I think, games are slower, so you can get away with not being in the shape as maybe once upon a time you could. I'd like to see the bench go back to 7 personally and speed the game up so it's more entertaining for the fans, for the spectators. I'm still a fan of a tough physical arm wrestle between the likes of the Springboks and the All Blacks, or England and the All Blacks. Those arm wrestles that are just big men going at it. Lots of pressure and huge collisions. I still love that, but that's probably the thing that's changed the most. Is feels like there's a bit less rugby being played and a lot more stoppages. I know World Rugby are trying to work on ways of changing that. I think you can no longer choose a scrum when you're given a free kick at a scrum now. I think you just have to have a free kick. So I think they're trying to get rid of as many scrums being reset as possible, which I think will help. But that's probably the one big thing is that the size of the players. When I started properly with All Blacks in 08, average size of our props was probably about, I want to say average size was about 116, 117 kilos. This year, the average size of the All Black props will be about 135. So we've gone up 20 kilos in the size of the props. in 15 years, so over a kilo and a half a year. So that's pretty crazy, and that trend's pretty not as representative in other positions, but our locks are the same. Our locks have gone from, probably averaging about 112 to last year World Cup. Our average lock size would have been 122, 123. So there's some big boppers out there.
And that's
and we're not a big we're not a big team on on international standards. The Springboks are huge. The French are huge. English are huge. We're probably middle of the park.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because it's like I know what you're saying as far as like the ball in play. Somehow it's like they showed the stats from the World Cup, and they said that there was still somehow more ball in play time from the 2023 World Cup than any of the previous ones. But I also think the games just took, and it must have been an extra 10-20 minutes to actually get through. So yeah, you still might be, the clock might still be running for a certain amount, or like longer whilst the game's being played, but you're getting that rest, and therefore, as you said, I think even the energy systems that are at play are going to be significantly different if you're allowed 2 minutes to pack down for a scrum, right? Because it's not, you haven't got 20 kilos of better strength and conditioning to get to there. You've got 20 kilos of, we actually can get away with a different type of athlete, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much a power based sport, because you've got so much time to rest. Like you think about if you average 35 minutes ball and play time, and the average game took about an hour, 110 minutes, you're talking about a 1-to-3 work to rest ratio. So you're working for 20 seconds and resting for 40. It's a whole. I mean, no wonder players don't get so tired anymore. I'm being a bit tongue in cheek, because it is still different. Like the speed and the intensity of the collisions are significantly higher. The collisions are massive. But I mean, that's creating significant injuries too. So, I do wonder if the game was sped up a bit. I mean, we saw Rugby League change their rules, and their athletes have got smaller, and the game's got faster, and it's flourishing as a sport over this side of the world, because it's so entertaining. There's just so much Rugby League being played. So yeah, it's you've just got to prepare the athletes for what the rules entail, and at the moment they're trying to tweak the rules to try and get a little bit more rugby in a game and a little bit less stoppage time. And when they do that, I think we'll change how we have to condition the athletes, which will be great.
I do think this is an interesting avenue that we're going down here. I wasn't planning on it, but I like this, because it's like one of the core values I always say of rugby, or the core like proponents of why it's being played, or why it's such a challenging game, is because it really is supposed to challenge you across the spectrum. Like, not in the same way that NFL is. NFL's like, clearly you got your power, you got your dynamic actions, but then you've got nothing. You've got this big dead period. The idea of rugby is that you don't have that, so you have to tap into that aerobic system to keep you going with that. But where the game is going to try and potentially get more highlights, I don't know, or I don't know how it's got to this point. I guess maybe just with professionalism, the way teams are playing, it has slowed the game, like the whole game down, and made it easier, I guess, in a way. Like, but at the high level, I don't think you still see that in the, like, once you go down a few tiers, the game is still like massively just an aerobic based sport, and there's not too long between stoppages where someone's going on and getting checked for 5 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, I think if you ask a test player, out of any international team, I think they'd probably argue with you and I and say that tests are incredibly tough physically, and I think that the reason for that is because it is so physically hard. Like big men, big players, huge collisions, just brick walls of defence. So I think physically, the challenge is just different. It is a strength power type challenge, a size challenge. I think if there was some ways of, I've tried to introduce, the shot clocks, kicking within 30 seconds and all that sort of stuff, and a certain time to set scrum. So they're playing with all that, and I think just for the spectator's perspective, I think it'd be nice if they keep trying to make it faster without compromising safety. they talk about the scrums being sped up in terms of setting quicker, but then you have the scrum coaches and the athletes saying, well, that's a player welfare issue because if we're not ready for the scrum, we'll break our necks, So there just needs to be some common sense, but I think you and I are on the same page. Like, it'd be nice to get rid of some of these stoppages, especially ones that are not required.
Yeah, and it would give extra avenues to sort of solve the problem of rugby, because right now it is, you say the All Blacks are one of the, like, they're middle of the ground, but apart from probably South Africa and the French, all the rest, and you can look from like 1 to 15, the body types are getting more and more and more similar, just big, powerful humans, So I wonder if we can get back to, leaning into more like of the Cheslin Colbys or the who else would we say, like a dynamic hooker, or those different players, Quagga Smiths, the players that, I mean, he's just a powerful unit as well, but you get my point. Different ways you can solve it through power, through the scrummaging, or you can solve it by just making a team absolutely knackered, because at the rate we're going, it's not doing that. And again, I don't think it's representative of the sport throughout the entire game, throughout the once you go down to club rugby and etc. I don't think it's too much like that, and you do get, and that's where you get the big difference between the test rugby players and then the club players,
Yeah, 100%.
All right, let's one more question on the strength and condition stuff that you've been doing with the All Blacks. I'd like to know if there's any undervalued areas that you think that you've been tapping into that you guys have got an advantage with, that most casual players, amateur players potentially wouldn't have been, and maybe even other semi-professional or young guys that are looking to come up have probably potentially continually overlook.
I think any player, any sport, actually, I think the area that most people pay least attention is nutrition. I don't think we've got an edge in that space. I just think that most players, most humans can eat better, and I think that recovery is still an area, particularly I think in age group, club, and even semi-professional, professional teams. I think we talk about players playing week in, week out for 15, 16 years. Recovery and looking after your body is just second to none. You only get one body, and I'm sure there's lots of players out there that wish they had looked after themselves better so they could play for longer, and so I think probably the key thing is just education and commitment to looking after your main tool, which is your body, your main asset. And to do that, it's about recovery, it's about nutrition, it's about sleep, and doing all the things that maybe you don't like doing, but are really good for you to do.
Yeah, and sometimes with the recovery thing, it's another one of those, the most unsexy recovery things. You've already touched on them. You've touched about the difficulty of the sleep and the stress demands of long travel. You spoke about nutrition. Those two things, quite simply, are the most important recovery things that people, I think, tend to overlook because it's not the sexy stuff. I'd rather do 10, 15 minutes in the ice bath and make the big scene of that and still only get like 6 hours sleep, which...
100%. Yeah, like you, the low hanging fruit are pretty much what you're putting in your mouth and how much shut eye you get. It's nail those two before you worry about whether you're in the ice bath for 5 minutes or 8 minutes.
And it's also one of those things, particularly with both sleep and nutrition, you don't know how good it feels to be properly slept and properly fed until you're both properly slept and properly fed. You think this is how everyone feels, is kind of tired, kind of, I don't know, not quite ready, but just grinding their way through it. And then all of a sudden, it can get so much better.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, I want to switch gears now and talk about yourself and your background. I know that this is not something you shout too much on your own Instagram, on your own social media and stuff, but I think you recently qualified for Kona in the Ironman. Can you talk about what that process was like? Because that and potentially even the significance of that, because a lot of people might not know what how significant that is.
Ironman's 3.8k swim, 180k bike, and a 42k run. So I've been doing them for the last, this is the first year I haven't done one actually. I've been doing them the last sort of 12 years. And the World Championships are held in Kona, Hawaii. I've qualified, I think I've qualified 5 or 6 times, but I can't go because normally we're playing the Springboks in South Africa. So, I won't sort of get to go to the World Champs until I stop working in rugby, unfortunately. So, but I'm figuring out a plan, figuring out a sort of a strategy to achieve that. But yeah, you basically have to qualify. You qualify by sort of finishing high in your age group at one of the races that are around the world, and it's a tough event. I love it. It's just you against yourself, you against the clock, and it's a bit of survival. How fast can you go without breaking yourself and blowing yourself to pieces? So you're sort of on the edge for 9 or 10 hours. So it's I love it. I'm a bit of a nutcase, but it's cool fun. It's cool fun.
That's impressive. So what's your PB time now then that got, well, I guess if you've qualified a few times, and there's been a few times that got you there.
Yeah. I think 2021, so 3 years ago, I think I did 9 hours 20 in Taupo. So it was pretty not bad for an age grouper. So that was coming out of COVID, I think. So all that time at home, locked up in hotels and what have you, I must have got some good training and something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you must have. So with your busy job, family, etc., like, it's funny, people will not necessarily shirk on their commitments, but underestimate what they can quite commit to, with families, with jobs, and they've, people listen to this will have their rugby practice or touch or whatever a couple times a week. Is there anything that you can give as far as, because Ironman time commitment is like, it's right up there, So is there anything that, or any advice or any hacks that you've got for like finding that time to be able to train with everything that you've got going on?
Yeah, I think I write lots of lists and I plan every minute of my day. It's sort of how I have survived this far. I'm having a break from it because I stopped enjoying everything around the training side of things. So having a break, just trying to get my mojo back. But no, I think the important thing is to make sure you stop and actually not smell the roses, but enjoy what you're doing. And as soon as I stopped enjoying it, I was like, well, I'm not going to keep doing this because it's hard. But I think, just keep stopping, taking a breath, and make sure you're enjoying whatever it is you're doing. But in terms of time commitment, I'm a competitor. I don't want to just do something. I want to do it really, really well. And I'm the same as that in my work and my job. I don't want to just work for the All Blacks. I want to do an awesome job for the All Blacks so we win. So I think I've got pretty high standards, and it comes across in my commitment to the Ironman race. So, plan well. Train hard, sleep as much as you can, and try and keep balance. Balance is probably the toughest thing most of us find to achieve in life, and that's definitely me. So, sometimes you got to sit back and just readjust that balance, and that's what I've done this year.
I think one of the things with finding that balance is leaning into that enjoyment. I think the enjoyment and like sort of motivation, they're almost continually like cyclical, because the more you enjoy it, the more you realize, oh yeah, this is why I do it, which then makes it more enjoyable because you're getting better, and it's sort of this continuous feedback loop. And sometimes when you think of training as, this is something I've got to do, and you have that, or even just like that word grind that's come into the ether the last, I don't know, 5-10 years or whatever, particularly with fitness stuff. Like, if you're seeing your stuff as a grind, you're already, with just one word, made it that much more difficult, because now that's how you're going to perceive it. Whereas if you're seeing it as something that this is what you're doing is because you enjoy it, and then to do what you enjoy better, like, I think that's already made it easier to try and look for the time that might not even necessarily be available. But at least now you've started the process of looking 100%. For it, right?
100%. Like it's you can say the same about everything, not just about exercise or health, or say about work, say it about family. Like, it's it should all be about doing things that you love, and for the right reasons. So I think that, Ironman was feeling like a grind last year, so that's why I stopped. But now I'm excited and can't wait to start again. So it's sort of, because I've realised what I loved about it and what I didn't love about it. So, and it happens. That's what happens as we grow older. Everything changes. What we did 2 years ago isn't necessarily what we need to do this year.
Yeah. And that's okay, and that's okay that, because I'm sure this is because of your day job and your work, you're able to recognize that quite early and be like, okay, if I'm not enjoying this, I'm only going to keep resenting it, and then I'm not going to put my all into it. I'm just going to duck out for a bit. And that's going to come back eventually. And if it doesn't, that's also fine. Like, you don't have to, we're not, particularly every rugby player that's listening to this, you don't have to play rugby. You're doing it because it's something that's fun. And
absolutely,
the enjoyment just makes it so much. And if you have to take time away from training, that's fine. It's only like you took a year away or whatever. That's only a year. You can still always go back and then pick it up right back up where you left it.
Yeah, 100%.
Is there any influences that the stuff that you've been doing with Ironman has had on your professional career for working with the All Blacks, or any of your other consultancy work that you do?
Yeah, I think what I suppose I practice what I preach to a degree, but young athletes that we help on Rugby Ready programs, we still try to lay a very big foundation for fitness, being fit. There'll be a lot of programs out there that people get on that's just gym focused and gym dominated, and we pride ourselves on still making sure everyone's fit and having that base to launch their game from. I believe that being fitter makes you more resilient and robust. Whereas a lot of S&C coaches think that being stronger in the gym will make you more resilient and more robust. And I think there's just a nice sweet spot where you actually need to do both. So I think that what we do in the ABs and what I do with Rugby Ready is both. You need to be fit and you need to be strong, versus just being strong. So and that I suppose some of those lessons are learnt from myself and my own fitness and what I've tried and what I've done. And it's not hard to stay fit aerobically for running, for big people. And so, that's probably something that's carried over from Ironman or triathlon is that focus on aerobic ability, not just strength and power.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you said that, and I'm glad that that's what you do, because this is something that I've been banging on about for a long. I always think the amount of amateurs that would message me, and even I get it, because you'll get strength and conditioning coaches that they got into strength and conditioning because they love the gym. And then they're like, okay, how can I use the gym to get better at rugby? And it's sometimes the amount of people they'll get in contact and they say, oh, what do you think about this program? Should I be I'm going to the gym 5 times a week? And I'm saying, hold on, what about your conditioning? And they're like, oh yeah, maybe I'll do that 1 day a week. What do you think? And I'm like, if you're already strong enough, your conditioning is your glaring weakness. You could put your gym back to 1 time a week and still potentially get stronger, and the effect that you're going to have on everything else because you've got aerobically fit is going to be bloody profound. I think people just don't see that.
Yep, no, 100%. I think there's too many strength and conditioning coaches that are just gym coaches. They're just their life is in the gym, and if you watch a rugby game, I remember watching an All Black. He was a young All Black, was a gym head, loved the gym. And I remember him turning up to lineouts, in a test match and missing all his lifts, because not because he wasn't strong enough, but he was exhausted every time he got to the lineout, and he just couldn't actually function, listen to the call, understand the call, and perform his movement because he was too unfit. Strong as an ox, probably one of the strongest guys in the park. But you've got a job that revolves around your aerobic energy system recovering enough to lift in the line out. So I think that you can't underestimate the impact of being aerobically and anaerobically fit for running in the game of rugby.
And you think the amount of times that the All Blacks have won Test matches in the last like 5 to 10 minutes, or they've been in tight Test matches. Like everyone knows, when you're with the All Blacks, you can't be close if there's 10 minutes or 20 minutes to go, because that's when they start to step up another gear. And it might have even changed a little bit. That could be one of the biggest reasons which changes, because of the way the game has changed a little bit, because now teams are tending to bring on 8 players off the bench, that they can sort of hold out in those last minutes instead.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Yeah. The other thing I want to touch on with the aerobic system is like how I think it impacts your ability in the gym. So your ability to gain strength, gain muscle, potentially even get faster and stuff. Do you see that with the guys that you coach as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, that's what I mean. Like when you talked about me, like what have I learned in myself and what I do for Ironman and stuff. Like when you're fit, in Ironman, like that's what I love the most is when you're like, the last 3 or 4 weeks leading up to the race, you can go for a 2-hour run and the next day feel like you've done nothing, like, you go for a 5-hour bike ride and you get off the bike and you're a bit jaded. You wake up in the morning, you just feel amazing. Like you just recover so fast. And I think that when it comes to, rugby players who, you have to jump, you have to push, you have to scrum, you have to tackle, you have to sprint, you have to jog, you have to walk. If you're aerobically fit, you recover fast, right? And that's just not just within the game or within training, but day to day. If you're recovering better day to day because you're fitter, you're going to be able to train harder. And if you can train harder, recover faster because you're fitter, then the outcome on Saturday is outstanding. So I think it's really important. Like it's if I'm big and strong, even the smallest amount of activity you feel and get tired and you feel like you've done something. But if you're fit, you wake up in the morning, you just want to do it all again.
Yeah, like you can't. I see. You don't want to be those powerlifters that do a set of 3 or 5 on the squats and then need 10 minutes to get your breath back to go again. Like you can't do it. But that's what a lot of people don't think about. They don't see how those sessions I've been in the gym with powerlifters and they take like 2.5 hours to get through a session. I'm like, you don't have the time for that, mate. If you're trying to be a rugby player, if you're trying to get through as much work, plus juggle all the other things that we've already spoken about as well.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So you've mentioned it a few times now, and I mentioned it in the intro as well. Is your new platform? Actually, I don't know how long it's been since you've launched Rugby Ready. It actually has been quite a while. So I'll say new in inverted quotes. So yeah. So what's the process What's the process of setting that up been like?
Oh, it's been awesome. So Bucky, my business partner, is based in Canada. Met him like randomly. Actually, he wanted to come along and get some experience with the All Blacks, and I just said no, go. And got to know him, and just he's just a great person, great strength and conditioning coach, and we just hit it off. So we formed this platform because we felt that there was a bit of a gap, a bit of a niche that we could fill. And yeah, it's basically been gone from just a small idea to it's full on. It's growing a lot. We're starting to get some awesome partners involved. Lots of cool athletes from all around the world. Got a little community of members, and it's the momentum's just starting to really pick up. So loving working with people around the world. It's been good fun.
That's awesome. And so yeah, I've spoken with Bucky already, and he's going to be coming on the podcast as well. So I'm excited that he's got your seal of approval as a coach, and absolute beast in the weight room as well. But he's also not just a powerlifter, even though he is also a powerlifter. I'm interested to see what that will be like, but also with the platform. So have you noticed a a difference in the mindset of people that apply compared to like the professionals that you're working with day in, day out?
Yeah, it's interesting. I without thinking too much about it, there is what I find is people who are wanting to work with us are just really keen and love the game, and so the enthusiasm, excitement, and commitment's awesome. So there's so many people out there that want to play better rugby and want to enjoy rugby by being fitter and stronger. So I don't know if there's a difference, but it's just people that actually commit and want to actually work hard. Actually similar to what I see in rugby at the elite level. Just enthusiasm for their craft and wanting to get better, and that's what we love. We love athletes that approach us and are doing it because they want to be better, they want to learn, and they want to play for a long time. So the more people we can help with that, the better.
Yeah, and I also think like amateur, like 99+% of rugby players are completely amateur, and they've got to manage their rugby around everything else that they've got going on. That's why I asked about the time commitment and help in that area, because I do think it's like one of those things where people can say, "Oh, I'm not professional. I guess I don't need to take it seriously." But I think you could flip that on its head, and for you, firstly, for you, if you're an amateur listed, like it's everything. It's absolutely everything, because it's something that we've already spoke about. You enjoy, you really want to do. Therefore, it's probably more important that you make time, because it's harder to make time because it's not your job. It's actually something now that you've got to pursue in your free time. Therefore, potentially in many ways, it's like more valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. It's more valuable is a good word for it. Yeah, really enjoyable, and you're right. Like just the balancing act for athletes that also have lots of other things on their plate and they aren't professionals. Like a lot of people just need help with balancing their week to get a good performance on Saturday, and I love that stuff.
Yeah, and to me, we sound like we've got very similar client bases. It's interesting to hear that, because it's one of the biggest things, and maybe you can touch on this as well, is I find it's giving people the okay to rest or to do less, because you've only got so much time, you've only got so much stress and stuff that you can get through. And these are people, as you say, that they're so bloody keen, they just want to work hard, they just want the most. But sometimes that actually can come at a detriment to your performance at the end of the come Saturday, right?
100%. And that's the cool thing, is actually telling people it's okay to just have a day off or 2 days off, or just go to the gym once this week. A lot of people are out there thrashing themselves trying to get better, and actually they just need told to just pull back a bit and they'll get better. It's an awesome challenge, and it's so cool helping people.
And the story of Sam Whitelock sort of typifies that perfectly. You said it took him a couple years to get his squat. Like, it took a couple years to sort of nail down his squat. Not even to squat 200 kilos or this X amount of kilos to look impressive. Just to get it acceptable took him years. Like, you've just got to, I think, widen in that time horizon. Okay, you can do these things. But rather than say, I've got to do this week or this month or within the next 3 months, you just lengthen that out, and you realize if you still want to be playing, you just still want to stay in the game. Yeah, it's much easier. But it's hard because these people are keen and they just want to do more and more and more,
Yeah, and a phrase I like that we use often is hurry slowly. Like
I love that. I'm stealing it.
Yeah, hurry slowly. So yes, we've got to sort your squat out, and yes, we want to do it quickly, but let's take our time, if that makes sense. Let's do it actually properly, and the rewards will come. We just have to be patient. It's a phrase my wife keeps talking to me about at the moment: delayed gratitude. Like it's so important. Like, you actually just going to the gym and chucking heaps of weight on the bar and thinking that's going to help you play better on this Saturday is foolish. But building our strength over time and being patient will pay dividends in 3 or 4 years' time. So I think that's probably a really good concept for young athletes to be thinking about, is hurry slowly. Do things well, take our time to get better, and it will come, and we'll reap the rewards down the line.
And it's also a lesson that you kind of keep having to relearn as well. Like I was a bit bummed at my performance on this Saturday. I was due for my second long run. I'm preparing for like a half, but like just on a whim, a half marathon. So I got my second 15K in, and I hadn't improved on any like of the measures. So like my heart rate hadn't got lower or anything like that. But then I looked at it, and I looked at the fatigue that I was carrying. I looked at the aerobic. Oh, sorry, not the aerobic. I looked at the weather that I was running in, the situation. Like none of it was conducive for me to improve anyway, and I've still got the work done. And I didn't run well the week before to run well this week. I'm doing all of this for later down the line. But it's still so easy to get frustrated at yourself in the moment, right?
Oh, 100%. And that's often why you need a coach, right? Because,
Yeah.
like I know what I'm doing for Ironman, but I need a coach, because I need a coach to tell me that, hey, you haven't improved this week because you're carrying all this fatigue, because we've loaded you up for the last 3 weeks. And as an athlete, you just get stuck inside it thinking, how come I haven't improved? But yeah, you're bang on. Like you will improve a lot when you pull back on the load, right? And that's the key, understanding the process and being patient.
And even though you know better, you don't know better than your emotions. Your emotions still jam in there and fuck up the whole process.
Oh, absolutely. Like, and that's often like I think when I think about you asked earlier on in the convo about innovation in sports science and all those sorts of things. Like I think that as a coach, as a performance coach, I think the biggest role you have is actually helping people make better decisions and how they're going to approach the week for the performance. And so you've already touched on it a few times. That's taken some weight off the bar when you need to take some weight off the bar, even though your ego is saying I can't. By me telling someone to, takes the decision off them, but actually helps their performance on Saturday. So I think that sort of that individual athlete approach of what does this athlete need today for the performance on Saturday, and everyone's so different, and being able to collaborate with the athlete around what's best for them, why and for how long and how heavy. I think that's the art of it all, isn't it? And there's not a lot of sports science that'll tell you that.
No.
It's the conversations and knowing the athlete and your experiences that you can draw on to make good decisions.
Absolutely, mate. This has been great. Nic, where can people find out more about Rugby Ready, yourself, the content that you're putting out? I'll put whatever links you mentioned in the description below, but if people are just listening.
Yeah, awesome. Rugby Ready on Instagram, you'll find us there, and just hit us a follow or drop us a message, and we'll come back to you. nicgill.com as well, and that's all sort of linked up to Rugby Ready as well now. So reach out, any messages, any questions. Always here to help, and I reply to everyone. So touch base and go well.
All right, beautiful. Cheers, mate. Thanks for joining me today. This has been great.
No sweat, champion. Thank you.